Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernest Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. The Week 9 AP Top 25 poll is out, which means that Week 8 has come and gone in college football. All of the results are in, which has shaken up the Top 25 poll like it does every week. I'm going to get into it and see what I think about each team's ranking this week. Now, Georgia and Michigan, it's the same old story. They're both number 1 and number 2, even though Michigan is garnering more first place votes because they keep on destroying everybody, including their rival Michigan State on the road last week, 49-0. What an impressive win by the Wolverines. It still wasn't enough to pass Georgia, who's still clinging on to the number 1 spot, even though they had a bye. Georgia has a tough date with Florida up next, and Michigan has a bye themselves next week. Only way that Georgia would fall for number 1 is if they lose to Florida, but for now, the AP voters have made it clear that Georgia's still ahead of Michigan for now. Ohio State's at number 3, and they beat Penn State in a classic game. The Nittany Lions played really good on defense, but their offense just couldn't get anything going. Ohio State's offense wasn't great either against Penn State's defense, but it was a little bit better and just enough for the Buckeyes to get the win. Obviously not enough for them to move up to number 1 or number 2, but it was a great win for the Buckeyes to cement that number 3 spot in the AP Top 25 rankings. Florida State, they're at number 4. They beat Duke last week. That was a really good win. Even though the Blue Devils didn't have Riley Leonard, they have Wake Forest on the road up next. Can't overlook any opponent, but I would say that Florida State has solidified themselves as the number 4 team in college football for now. Outside of that Boston College game, they've looked good this season. At number 5, you got Washington, and off the heels of their really impressive win over the Oregon Ducks, they play Arizona State at home, and they only win 15-7. That was not an impressive win. Michael Penix Jr. had his worst game to date this season with 2 interceptions, and they survived at home. They have Stanford on the road next week. That should be an easy game for the Huskies, but with the way Washington played this week, you just never know. They should win as long as they play better than they did last week, but Washington has no case to move any higher in the AP Top 25 poll for the way they played against the Sun Devils. Oklahoma's at number 6. They beat UCF, but it was a close one. They only won 31-29 over UCF. Gus Malzahn threw all the stops, and they were a 2-point conversion away from tying the game up to go to overtime, but Oklahoma survived. A win is a win. They have Kansas on the road up next. That's not an easy game. If Oklahoma can win, though, they'll stay at number 6 in college football unless a team ahead of them loses. But with the Sooners barely beating UCF, there was no way that they could move up in the AP Top 25 poll. Texas is at number 7. They won at Houston last week, but like Oklahoma, they barely won. Houston's been playing a little bit better lately, and it was on the road, but still, Texas should have won that game by more. But a win is a win. They got BYU up next, but there is no reason in the world for Oklahoma and Texas to really move at all. The only reason Texas moved up was because Penn State lost. Oregon's at number 8, and they beat Washington State in much better fashion than Washington beat Arizona State. The Cougars are still a decent team, and Oregon was able to win that game by multiple scores. So that was a solid win. It's going to look good on the resume, but the Ducks have Utah on the road up next, and that's going to be for Oregon's college football playoff hopes. They cannot lose to Utah on the road if they want to stay in the playoff hunt, but that is a very tough place to play and could knock Oregon out of the top 10 if they can't win. Alabama's the number 9. They just creeping on back up in the poll. They beat Tennessee, their rival, in the third Saturday in October. They lit up the cigars, and Alabama is feeling pretty good about themselves coming into their bye week. They have one loss to Texas, but looking at Alabama's schedule, the toughest opponents left are LSU after the bye week at home and then Auburn on the road. Other than that, Alabama has a path to get back to the SEC championship game, and if they can somehow beat whoever they play, most likely Georgia, maybe Alabama still has a shot to make the college football playoff, even though as of now, it's probably still a long shot to most people. Penn State's at number 10. They fell 3 spots after losing to Ohio State on the road. It wasn't a bad loss, but still Penn State's offense just could not show up on the big stage. I think they should remain in the top 10. The AP voters did a good job there. They've got an easy game against Indiana at home next week, a get-right game, but the Nittany Lions have to win out if they want to make the college football playoff. Oregon State's number 11. They had a bye last week, but they've got Arizona on the road up next. It's always tough to play in the desert, but Oregon State is sneakily moving up the poll. They're still a long shot to make the college football playoff, but the Beavers are having a great season so far in the final season of the Pac-12, and Oregon State still has a shot to make the Pac-12 championship game as well. Ole Miss is at number 12. They won at Auburn last week, and that was a really good win because Hugh Freeze is the new head coach of Auburn. He was the head coach at Ole Miss, so there was a lot of storylines there, and it's always always tough to win in Jordan-Hare, but Ole Miss got the job done. They've got Vanderbilt up next. That's usually every single SEC team's easy game on their schedule, but still, if you're Ole Miss, cannot slip up and lose to Vanderbilt. But the Rebels moving up the poll as well and still have a shot to win the SEC West. Utah's at number 13. They only have one loss this season, but man, they looked really good at USC last week, beating the Trojans. And Utah's defense did just enough in this game, but USC's defense let them down. The Trojans cannot defend almost any team in college football. It doesn't matter how bad the offense is for that team. They let Notre Dame score a lot. They've let Utah score a lot. They let Colorado, Arizona State, San Jose State score a lot. So that's why Utah won this game. It's a good win for the Utes. I would argue their game against Oregon, though, is going to be even tougher, even though it's at home, because of that Oregon is a really good offensive and defensive team. Much better on defense anyway than USC. Still a good win for Utah. Not to take anything away from them, because this will still give Utah a chance to win the Pac-12, especially if they can beat Oregon next week. But the reason Utah only moved up one spot is because a lot of AP voters are starting to think a lot more poorly toward USC with the way that they're playing. Notre Dame's at number 14. They had a bye last week, and they've got Pittsburgh up next. That should be a game Notre Dame can win, especially because it's at home. Like I always say, can't overlook any opponent, but the Fighting Irish definitely needed that bye week, and they do look like one of the best two-loss teams in the country. Now, at number 15, you've got the other top two-loss team in the country, and the LSU Tigers. They've got 2 losses, but they destroyed Army last week. A lot of people thought it would be a close game, but LSU did not let the Armed Forces hang around. They've got a bye next week. That is much deserved. But LSU, I don't think they have any shot to make the college football playoff because they have 2 losses. But if they can win out and be really dominating in all their performance, including getting a big one over Alabama and probably Georgia in the SEC championship game, LSU can really move up in the AP Top 25 poll and get a really good New Year's Six game and maybe make the conversation interesting for the playoff. Missouri's at number 16. They had a good win over South Carolina last week, and they've got a bye up next. Missouri is at 7-1. Eli Drinkwitz has saved his job, and it's not just the fact Missouri's 7-1. They look good doing it. They're beating all the teams that they should be beating, teams that they're supposedly on equal playing field with, like South Carolina, Kentucky, in dominating fashion. So good job for Missouri. They deserve that number 16 spot. North Carolina's at number 17, and this should not have happened. What in the world happened to the Tar Heels, losing to the 1-5 Virginia Cavaliers at home that has never beaten a top 10 team on the road? That's right. Virginia has never beaten a top 10 team on the road. I had it on my thumbnail last week. Is UNC legit? And I think that this game right here showed that UNC was not legit. They're a good team. They've got a great quarterback in Drake May, but their defense still is questionable, and there's no reason in the world why they should have lost to a 1-5 Virginia team at home. So that was a bad loss for North Carolina, and that probably takes them out of college football playoff contention. Still in the race for the ACC, but what a poor loss for the Tar Heels. Louisville is at number 18, and they're right behind the North Carolina Tar Heels after they had that bad loss at Pitt in their own right. That was a bad loss for a team that a lot of people were high on as well, but Louisville had a bye last week to get things right. They've got a date with Duke at home. That's a tough game. Louisville can win if they play like they did against Notre Dame, but if Louisville plays like they did against Pitt, it's going to be very tough for the Cardinals to beat Duke, especially if Riley Leonard is back. Air Force is at number 19. They're 7-0 in the Mountain West. Very proud of the Falcons. They're playing great football. They won at rival Navy last week, and they have a bye that's much deserved. So I think that while Air Force obviously has no shot to make the college football playoff because they are in the Mountain West, if they can keep on winning, maybe they can get that Cotton Bowl slot in the New Year's Six bowl game if they can keep winning. At number 20, you got the Duke Blue Devils. After they lost to Florida State on the road, without Riley Leonard, it would have been extremely hard for Duke to pull off the win. They couldn't get it done. They tried, but Duke's still a top 25 team in my book. And if the Blue Devils can get Riley Leonard back and they can beat Louisville on the road, then definitely Duke will stay in the top 25. Tennessee's at 21. They fell 4 spots after losing to rival Alabama. They could not beat them 2 years in a row. It's always tough to beat them, especially in Bryant-Denny Stadium. And the Volunteers could not get it done despite being up 20-7.5, but they collapsed in the second half. They have Kentucky on the road up next, so things are not going to get any easier for Tennessee. That's a tough road game, even though Kentucky's been struggling the last couple weeks. If the Volunteers can't win that game, then Tennessee could fall out of the top 25. Tulane's at number 22. They won against North Texas last week. They didn't dominate in that game, and they struggled, but a win is a win. And they have Rice up next on the road. Rice has JT Daniels. Can't overlook food. You cannot lose to food, as Josh Pate would say. So Tulane in a pretty good position right now to possibly be that selection for the Cotton Bowl for a group of 5 team, but Tulane's going to have to keep winning or Air Force is going to get that selection. UCLA's at number 23. and they're higher in the rankings than USC for the first time in a couple of seasons. The Bruins are playing pretty good football. They destroyed Stanford on the road. I thought it would be a close game, especially after the way Stanford played against Colorado, but UCLA was not letting that happen. They completely floored the Cardinal, and they've got Colorado, the team that Stanford beat, coming up next. You can't overlook Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter, but as long as UCLA puts up points on that porous Colorado defense, I think the Bruins should be fine and should stay in the top 25 with a win. USC's at number 24, and this has all but ended the Trojans' chances of making the college football playoff and possibly making the Pac-12 championship game. Losing to Notre Dame was a bad loss, but at least that was out of conference. So USC only has one Pac-12 loss, but the way that they lost to Utah at home, how are they going to beat some of the other tough opponents they have coming up the rest of their season? They have Cal on the road. That's a get-right game, but USC's defense probably will allow Cal to score a lot of points the way that they're playing. I hate it for Caleb Williams. He's a really good quarterback. Yes, he hasn't played as well lately, but still, you can't expect the guy to play perfect every single week when USC's defense should help them win some games. They're just not getting it done, and that's ultimately why USC has fallen all the way to number 24 with these last two losses. And at number 25, showing some group of five love like Air Force and Tulane, we've got undefeated James Madison out of the Fun Belt ranked at number 25. They won at Marshall last week, which is an underrated win. Marshall is a pretty tough team, and James Madison got the job done. They've got Old Dominion coming up next. Old Dominion's beaten Virginia Tech a couple of times in the last few years, so James Madison has to play well against the Monarchs if they want to get another win and stay in the top 25. But proud of James Madison for cracking the AP top 25 in their first season of being in the FBS. Stinks that they can't make a bowl game because of the NCAA rules. And in the other receiving votes, you've got Florida, Liberty, Kansas State, Miami, Fresno State, Oklahoma State, Toledo, Kentucky, Rutgers, UNLV, and Wisconsin. Not as many teams in the other receiving votes as usual. I guess there's not a lot of teams that AP voters feel even have a case to be in the AP top 25 poll. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below if the AP voters got it right. I agree with most of these picks. It always gets easier to rank teams the further you get in the season because there's more data to go off of. But again, let me know if you guys think there are teams that should be ranked higher or lower in the AP top 25. And out of all the matchups last week, which game's results surprised you the most? For me, it was Virginia knocking off the North Carolina Tar Heels, but there were a lot of other crazy results as well. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.